My name is Lisa Ross. I've been at Crossroads for 7 years. I go to Pittsburgh West. I'm married and have 3 children. I have a daughter-in-law and 4 granddaughters. I'm in Kids Zone. I've always taught Sunday school, probably since I was 17. So starting a new church, that was the most comfortable spot for me. Emotionally, when I got to Crossroads, there was a huge transition. Learning about God's love, that really drew me because I was a little broken, a lot broken. And the message of God's love, not God's punishment, really drew me in. When I got to my small group, I was totally broken. Like, I was coming from a divorce and had my children, but I didn't want to lose God, but I knew that pain has a way of doing that. My anchor was my small group. My small group leader, she would call me and she would meet me for lunch and just say, hey, I want to keep you connected. It was very helpful. It was very helpful. It was life-changing. Like, small group was life-changing. I recently was married, and we have young adult children that are all in college. Keeping God first financially is hard. So you have to continue to sow so you can reap. Like, you have to continue to do that. The challenge of being generous is coming up with a family budget that the entire family can agree upon, so that we can continue to give to God and take care of the family and other needs as they arise. The way that I would say God is working through me right now with Magnify is I don't want to miss what God's doing. And so I want to continue to grow so that God can use me continually. Like, I don't want to get to a point where I'm just comfortable sitting in a seat. The people that can be healed and set free and delivered and saved, that's exciting to me. Thinking about the people's lives that will be changed because they gave their life to Christ, that is so much to me. Like, while you're on earth, it saves you from so much. Having a relationship with God saves you from so many terrible decisions. When I was a young adult and I wasn't living for Christ, things that my father said to me about relationship with Christ, or things that I remember, from the Bible or from church growing up, they used to echo in my mind. For somebody else to have that opportunity, that excites me, because I can see the times when the Holy Spirit snatched me out of something that could have either taken my life or sent me down some terrible path. And I know, like, I look back on it and I'm like, oh, that was God. That was only God. And so to think about other young people coming in and having those same experiences, where when they're in their 40s, they can say, I know the Holy Spirit kept me from something. That excites me, that people's lives will be changed.
All right, praise God. Yeah, it was a great night with Advanced Commitment Night last week. That map over there, if we turn the lights out, you'd see a lot of glowing dots there. We don't need to turn the lights out. But there'll be a lot of glowing dots there as people, families, put their dot where they wanted to see the light of Jesus breaking in, where they live, work, play, or learn, one of those places. And I will say at the end there, when people were making those commitments, there was a palpable, a tangible sense in the room of faith and of consecration. Like, here I am, God. And it was an honor to be there. So I look forward to that as a kind of a precursor to next week, as we're gathered for our commitment time next week. So this is the 4th week of our Magnify series. If you've got a Bible, turn with me to Genesis chapter 22. We're following the life of Abraham through the book of Genesis. It's page 56 in your book there, your Magnify book, if you want to turn there as well. And I want to thank J.D. Greer for insights he had. He did some great work on Genesis 22, which I'm sharing with you today. So I years ago heard this story about a student studying for his ornithology final exam. That's a study of birds, ornithology. And he poured himself into it. He tried to absorb everything in the textbook. He went over those notes that he had in class. he was ready. He was saying, bring it on. And he walked into the exam room, and he was just deflated when he looked up onto the board and saw that the final exam was none of the stuff he had studied. It was 25 pictures. But these were not just pictures of birds, like, their feathers and such. No, just the feet. 25 birds' feet. And the exam was identify the bird by its feet. And the student was, first surprised, and then really downcast, and then angry. He said to the professor, "This is not a fair test. This test is just not right. It's unfair." And the professor said, "Well, that's too bad. That's the exam. You've got to do it." And the student said, "I'm not going to do it. I'm going to walk out of here." And the professor said, "Well, if you leave, you fail." And the student says, "Too bad. I'm leaving. I'm walking." And he starts walking, and the professor says, "All right, well, you fail. What's your name?" And the student stopped, rolled up his pant legs, and said, "Well, you tell me by my feet. What's my name?" So, not fair. Well, some might think that the test God gave Abraham in Genesis 22 was not fair. I mean, after all, God had already tested Abraham a number of times. In Genesis 12, he told Abraham, leave your family, leave where you were born, and just start moving. Go to the land I'm going to show you. You'll know when you get there. And Abraham had enough trust that he just took off, and he passed that test. And then God says, I'm going to make your descendants a great nation. But he had no kids, and so he waited for decades. For 25 years, Abraham had to wait for a son. But he did, for the most part. He hung in there. He passed that test. And then in Egypt, the Pharaoh was expressing interest in his wife, and Abraham had enough, well, no, he didn't actually have enough trust. There, he failed that test, actually, but his wife forgave him. That was good. So, most of the tests Abraham passed. And then comes this one in Genesis 22. This was the most profound, the deepest test of all. Would he have the faith? Would he have the trust to pass this test? We read about the test in verses 1 and 2. It starts like this. Sometime later, God tested Abraham's faith. "Abraham," God called. "Yes," he replied, "here I am. Take your son, your only son, yes, Isaac, whom you love so much, and go to the land of Moriah. Go and sacrifice him as a burnt offering on one of the mountains, which I will show you." Abraham and Sarah waited 25 years for their child to be born, for Isaac. 25 years. And now, he's an older adolescent, like elementary school, maybe 11 years old or something. And he is the pride and joy of their life. He is the center. He's the reason that they're really living. In fact, verse 2 here, Genesis 22, verse 2 is the first time the word love is used in the Bible. And it's used with how Abraham feels about Isaac. God says, "Yes, Isaac, whom you love so much." First time love's used. Isaac was everything to Abraham. His legacy, it was the fulfillment of God's promise to him. And now he's called to sacrifice Isaac, which he couldn't really even understand. How could God ask him to do this? And we're going to touch on this later. But for now, we can just know that Isaac, our Isaac, kind of represents what we trust the most, what we value, what's most precious to us. That's our Isaac. So, verse 3, the next morning, Abraham got up early. He saddled his donkey and took 2 of his servants with him, along with his son Isaac. Then he chopped wood for a fire for a burnt offering and set out for the place God had told him about. On the 3rd day of their journey, Abraham looked up and saw the place in the distance. On the 3rd day, he saw the place. That's impressive because, Abraham had to not just say yes when God speaks, but he had then to, day after day, put his one foot in front of another and had to keep going towards that place of sacrifice. It's all too easy for us to say yes to God in a moment, and then 2 days later, 3 days later, that kind of fades out, and that intention becomes distracted, and yet that's not what Abraham did. He committed, and he kept going. On the 3rd day, he got there. to Mount Moriah. Verse 5, he says, "Stay here with the donkey," Abraham told the servants. "The boy and I will travel a little farther. We will worship God there, and then we will come right back." Abraham said he was going to worship. In the Old Testament, worship always involved a sacrifice. Every time. That's why they built an altar. So they could take, usually an animal, something that was measuring their wealth. That was in livestock in those days. They would take a sheep, or they'd take an ox or a bull, and they would sacrifice to the Lord on the altar. That was worship. So here is Abraham. He was going to worship. He was bringing wood, it said. He was bringing a knife. These are the implements. He was not bringing a guitar up to that mountain. He was going to worship the way worship happened in the Old Testament, with a sacrifice. And it was not just anything that they would put on that altar. You couldn't take a sick sheep and then offer it to God. No, it was to be your best. It was to be maybe the first of the flock. It was your first and your best is what you would offer to God. And so Abraham was called to offer his first and only son, the one who was promised to him. How could he do this? Verse 5 explains how he could do this, how he could go day after day towards this place. It says, Abraham told the others, "We will worship and come back." Did you notice he says, "We will worship and come back"? Not, "We will worship and I will come back." No, he was expecting that Isaac would return with him. He was going to sacrifice Isaac, but somehow, he didn't know how, but somehow he figured Isaac was going to come back. Hebrews 11, 17 and 19 in the New Testament says, "By faith Abraham, when God tested him, offered Isaac as a sacrifice. Abraham reasoned that God could even raise the dead, and so in a manner of speaking, he did receive Isaac back from death." So Abraham had a confidence, a trust, such a deep confidence that what God was asking him to do would be good. He promised, that he would have a son. He did. He figured, okay, God is good. Something's going to happen here that's good. And so he was going to worship through the sacrifice. Now, Isaac knew that worship meant a sacrifice. And he was with his dad, and he could look around and he could see, well, Dad's got the wood, he's got this knife, and we're going to have the altar. But he's saying, I don't see any animal here. So, verse 6, "So Abraham placed the wood for the burnt offering on Isaac's shoulders, while he himself carried the fire and the knife. As the two of them walked on together, Isaac turned to Abraham and said, 'Father?' 'Yes, my son,' Abraham replied. 'We have the fire and the wood,' the boy said, 'but where is the sheep for the burnt offering?' 'God will provide a sheep for the burnt offering, my son,' Abraham answered. And they both walked on together." This is what kept Abraham going. God will provide. That was his conviction. He was convinced that God was good. God keeps his promises. God will provide. And that's what keeps us going, knowing that God is good. God keeps his promises. God will provide whatever our need might be. And in verse 9, it says, "When they arrived at the place where God had told him to go, Abraham built an altar and arranged the wood on it. Then he tied his son Isaac and laid him on the altar on top of the wood. And Abraham picked up the knife to kill his son as a sacrifice. At that moment, the angel of the Lord called to him from heaven, 'Abraham, Abraham.' 'Yes,' Abraham replied, 'Here I am.' 'Don't lay a hand on the boy,' the angel said. 'Do not hurt him in any way, for now I know that you truly fear God. You have not withheld from me even your son, your only son.'" So Abraham passed the test. Abraham proved not just to God, but to himself, that he had faith in God and God's goodness, God's promises. He had faith. And, this moment, this test, as well as the other tests that he had been given, all made Abraham who he was, the man of faith. He wasn't born that way. He became that. How? By saying yes when God spoke to him. By following through and obeying what God asked him to do. in each of those tests. Then he lived into his name. God gave him a new name called Abraham. He was called Abram by birth, and then God says, no, you're going to be Abraham, which literally means father of multitudes. And that's how Abraham lived into his name, because by this surrender, by this willingness to sacrifice, he became a father of faith to multitudes. So he became a father of multitudes, not just naturally, not just, with his family tree, but spiritually, to over half of the world. Father Abraham is the example of faith. He wasn't born that way. He became that through the testing. That's how you and I grow in faith as well. We're not born that way. We grow into faith by hearing from God and saying, okay, God, give me the power to do it, and we follow through, taking steps of faith, even if it looks risky. And it certainly looked that way to Abraham, but he said yes. And then what's amazing is what happens after. God then renews the promise he gave Abraham. Verse 15, then the angel of the Lord called again to Abraham from heaven. This is what the Lord says, because you have obeyed me and have not withheld even your son, your only son, I swear by my own name that I will certainly bless you. I will multiply your descendants beyond number, like the stars in the sky and the sand on the seashore. Your descendants will conquer the cities of their enemies, and through your descendants all the nations of the earth will be blessed, all because you have obeyed me. Every time Abraham is tested, he trusts God and obeys. Every time, then God intensifies the promise. He says, I'm going to multiply you like stars in the sky. He didn't hear that before. But now he hears this, you're going to be multiplied like stars in the sky. You know what? You and I, we're some of those stars. Because by faith, Abraham said yes. By faith, his descendants became the Jewish people to whom Jesus was born, through whom we hear the good news. We are some of the stars that Abraham was promised. And 2,000 years ago, another son climbed that same hill. Mount Moriah is where Abraham gave Isaac to be sacrificed. Mount Moriah is where Solomon built the temple, because Mount Moriah is where Jerusalem is. Jerusalem is built on 7 hills. One of them is Mount Moriah. And Solomon built the temple on the spot of Mount Moriah where Abraham was sacrificing Isaac. And scholars will say that Golgotha was either very close to or actually is Mount Moriah. And that's where Jesus climbed the hill to be crucified as a sacrifice for the sins of the world. So God did what he asked Abraham to do. God gave his one and only son that we would live, to bless the world. He did it himself. He sent Jesus. And Jesus chose to die on the cross so that we would have our sins paid for. And then, of course, he rose from the dead to offer new life to everybody who asks for it. Jesus was the Lamb of God. God will provide a lamb. If you read the story in chapter 22 of Genesis, after the angel stops Abraham from sacrificing Isaac, there's a lamb in the thicket in the bushes that they find and they sacrifice. And Jesus became the Lamb of God for us, for the sins of the world. And so when we grasp what God's done for us, when we understand how deep his love is, that he would die for us rather than be separated from us, it becomes a lot easier to say yes when he asks of us. Because we know he doesn't need anything. He only asks for our benefit. We can trust somebody who will die for us. And that's what God has done for us. So let me ask you today, what is your Isaac? What is most precious to you? Let's do a little exercise. If you would, just put your hands on your lap, palms up, both hands kind of palms up, and if you feel comfortable, close your eyes. And picture what's most important to you right now in your life. What's most important to you? Picture yourself holding that in your hands. Now, squeeze your hands together, closing them, squeezing it with the firmness that represents how much you want to hold on to that, how much it means to you. Now, if you're willing, if God were to ask you to sacrifice that for him, if you're willing to say yes, if he were to ask you to sacrifice that, go ahead and open your palms, leave them palms up, as a way of saying, yes, Lord, this is yours. I release it to you. It's not mine anyway. That's the Isaac and Abraham moment for us. Okay, you can open your eyes and be together again. You know, each of us have moments in our life where we're confronted with, am I going to hang on or will I sacrifice? And at the moment where God speaks, and that's the key, that God speaks, then we can ask him for strength to say yes, even if it means sacrifice. And for some of us, that's going to be reality is through our Magnify initiative. It's saying, okay, God, what are you calling for me to do? How am I to respond here? Really, the Magnify initiative is just a simple discipleship exercise. Here's the need, and now, God, what do you want me to do in response to this? And then whatever he says, that's what you do. That's discipleship. Hear and obey Jesus. So Magnify is that. It's this discipleship process. And the tool we're going to use next week is called a commitment card. And I trust you've got one. If you've not, we can get you one. Here's the commitment card. This is a tool we use to express our commitment back to God. So on the commitment card, there's a bunch of blanks. Let me just walk it through with you real quickly. So at the top blank is what I normally give in a year. So you just kind of figure whatever that is, and you fill that in. And then the next blank down is my expanded annual generosity as part of the Magnify initiative. So this is where we're going to put, okay, is God calling me to go beyond what I'm doing right now? For some of us, it's like, okay, I've heard about the 10% tithe. I'm not there yet. I want to get there, so maybe that's a step in that direction. You put in that blank. For some, you are tithing, and it's like, God, are you calling me to go beyond that? Years ago, many years ago when our church was young and our family was young, we did a generosity initiative to be able to get into our building. And I remember going through this kind of exercise, and I was thinking, all right, we really don't have much money. We are tithing 10%, but we had 3 little kids, and I wasn't making much money, and we didn't have much. I just couldn't figure out how we would give beyond what we were. And then I realized I have a degree in music education, so I took a bunch of piano students, and whatever they paid me, that was what we then offer back to God, as that's part of the expanded. So we just kind of be creative there. So you add those two together on the third line, that's the total, and then you multiply that times 2 because this is a 2-year initiative. So over 2 years, that's what goes in that blank that the arrow's pointing to. And then below that is gifts from our stored resources. Sometimes we might think, okay, well, I've got this other thing here. I'm going to sell that and get rid of that and offer that to God. I remember another campaign. We did that at our house. We had, some 3 almost teenagers at that point, and again, we were given, but we didn't know how we were going to give a lot more. So we sensed God prompting. What we sold. We had a van, a pretty nice van, and we sold that van and got a much plainer, less exciting one. And the difference then is what we then gave back to God. That would have been what I put in that line up there. Our kids were not thrilled that we sold the van, but they survived. They didn't care. Now it doesn't matter at all, years later. So then the bottom line is our 2-year Magnify commitment. That's the bottom line that we say, okay, God, this is my act of worship. And this year, for Lynn and I, yes, we're tithing, but, next year, I'm anticipating, going into a retirement status, which means our income, we're expecting our income to drop next year. And for the next, from then on, right? But we sense God pretty clearly speaking to us, and so we're actually going to double what we're giving right now over the next couple of years, because that's what we sense God's calling us to do. I don't know what God's calling you to do. And I just say this is our personal example, which you're not supposed to repeat or something. It's just the journey that we're on as followers of Jesus. Well, Lord, what do you want me to do? And we do that. So the card, really, what is the card is going to express our faith. Like, okay, God, I don't know what you're calling me. I'm going to say yes, but I don't know what the future holds. And it also will represent sacrifice as well, like Abraham with Isaac. So the bottom line for Magnify is it's worship. It's a response of worship back to him. And the reality is, too, that we do that through a local church. And if you don't feel like you should give to Crossroads Church, then okay, give to another church, because it's important that we do that. The church is the instrument that God uses in the world, as well as the family of God. And it's important for us, to be connected to and to give in that respect. It changes who we are. We each have these Abraham moments, and yet, the most important sacrifice of all that each of us are called to make is what Romans 12 says. And that is, it says, I appeal to you that you offer your bodies as living sacrifices to God. We offer our very self to him. That's what happens when we come to faith in Christ. Today, Jesus is offered, because of his own sacrifice, he's offering eternal life to you. A life under his lordship, and one that will never end. And so if you've not responded to him yet in your life, if you've not ever said, okay, Lord, I ask your forgiveness, and I'm going to ask you to lead me from here on out. I'm going to live for you, and I want your spirit to fill me. If you've never done that, that is the most important step of all today. That is where all of life begins. And you have a chance to do that today. That will affect your eternity, which means that if you say yes to Jesus, that he'll lead you throughout this life, he'll forgive you, he'll be changing your life to be more like him, and when this body caves out and it caves in and you don't have, you die, you'll live forever with him. And that, friends, is an amazing offer. That's what happens when we offer our bodies as living sacrifice to him. And so, I would encourage you to start that and start there today. In fact, let's bow together in prayer. If you've never responded to Jesus' invitation to follow him, today you can do it simply by telling him that's what you want to do. You can say, please forgive me, God. I want you to lead me and guide me. I believe you rose from the dead, and I will follow you. You lead. When you say that to him, just in the quietness of your heart, your life will pivot. And at that moment, you become a part of his family. And you begin this journey of discovering how much he loves you, how much he sacrificed for you, how much he gave for you, and how deeply he cherishes you. Well, I pray right now for any who in this moment are saying yes to you. Lord, I pray your spirit fill them, Lord, that you would let them know the joy of heaven is with them. I pray, Father, you pour out, Lord, your spirit upon them, Lord, that you would be leading them into a way of new life. Lord, for those of us who have been following you for a while, Lord, and are contemplating, what does it mean for us during this Magnified challenge, Lord? I pray you would speak clearly. And in this moment of silence, Lord, we listen to you. Lord, you are good. We know that you desire good things for us. You are the best of all. Now, Lord, we pray that you would give us strength to do whatever it is you ask of us, Lord, knowing that when we do it in partnership with you, that results in blessing, not just for ourselves, but for many others. In Jesus' name, amen.